You are the royal physician in Madrid. It is 1834, and King Ferdinand is dead. Yet your work is not finished. You are summoned to his private chambers, not to heal, not to diagnose, not to offer final counsel. The Queen Regent, Maria Cristina, waits for you. Her eyes are swollen from grief, but her voice is calm, controlled. What she asks of you sends a cold shock through your body. It is not merely strange, it feels profoundly unnatural. You hesitate and glance toward the bed where Ferdinand's corpse lies. Even in death, he seems to mock you, a lingering echo of the 2 decades during which he ruled Spain through fear, suspicion, and absolute control. Yet it is not his face that holds your gaze. It is what lies beneath the sheets, the grotesque physical abnormality that came to define his reign more than cruelty or betrayal ever could. A grotesquely deformed, oversized member, a deformity so extreme that historians whispered about it for generations, but never dared commit it to official record. As you prepare to preserve this anatomical aberration, for reasons known only to the Queen and perhaps to God, long-dismissed palace rumors rush back into your mind. They no longer sound like gossip. The custom-made cushions, the screams echoing through marble halls, the whispered attempts to produce an heir through methods bordering on torture, all of it now feels horrifyingly real. You are not preserving mere flesh. You are preserving the most disturbing symbol of a reign warped in both body and soul. To understand Ferdinand, you must begin with blood, not metaphorical blood, but the literal inheritance coursing through his veins, poisoned by centuries of dynastic inbreeding. The Spanish royal houses had spent generations marrying cousins, uncles to nieces, recycling the same fragile genes. What resulted was not a noble lineage but a genetic catastrophe. Physical deformities, mental instability, bodies that betrayed their own minds. Ferdinand was born into this on October 14, 1784, to parents who were themselves first cousins. The outcome was inevitable. From childhood, signs emerged, at first dismissed as awkward development. By adolescence, his condition could no longer be ignored. Whispers spread through the court. His anatomy was not merely large, it was monstrous. One physician cautiously noted that its dimensions and form would make intimacy nearly impossible. Another was blunt, comparing it to a billiard cue, narrow at the base, swelling grotesquely at the end, long enough to serve as a walking stick. This was not admiration, it was fear. In Ferdinand's world, excess was not virility but deformity. Classical ideals prized balance and proportion. His body marked him as an aberration, and he knew it. His father was distant. His mother openly flaunted her affair with a powerful favorite. And Ferdinand grew up steeped in humiliation and betrayal. Servants mocked him in secret. Foreign envoys reported whispers back home. The court became a theatre of quiet ridicule, with Ferdinand as its unspoken joke. Shame curdled into cruelty. By adolescence, he punished anyone who glimpsed his nakedness. One boy who entered his chambers by accident was beaten and exiled along with his family. The message was unmistakable. His shame was lethal. As marriage approached, his physicians were forced to confront the reality. Secret reports described an anatomy so abnormal that conventional intimacy would cause severe injury. The base was narrow, the length excessive, the girth unprecedented, with curvature and unknown tissue growths. To fulfill royal expectations, doctors and craftsmen devised elaborate contraptions, silk, leather, padded supports, oils and salves, turning the royal bedchamber into a grotesque hybrid of clinic and dungeon. Ferdinand obsessed over cures, swallowing powders, horns, herbs and elixirs that promised miracles and delivered nothing. When he married his cousin Maria Antonia of Naples, she entered the union with naive hope, believing the flattering title bestowed upon him. The wedding dazzled, the honeymoon collapsed into horror. On their wedding night, her screams echoed through the palace. Witnesses later recalled her crying out in terror, recoiling from what she saw, a reality no convent lesson could have prepared her for. Physicians were summoned, cushions arranged, oils applied. What followed was not intimacy, but a medical ordeal, painful, degrading, and so traumatic that she was sedated simply to endure it. From that night forward, her life became a cycle of fear, restraint, and forced compliance. bound to a king whose body and mind were equally broken. Every attempt at intimacy was orchestrated in advance, rigid and ceremonial. The cushions had to be placed at precise angles, the ointments warmed and applied with care. She was given just enough laudanum to blunt the pain without losing awareness. Then came the act itself, never loving, never gentle, only a grim duty carried out in strained silence or stifled sobs. When it ended, they withdrew to separate wings of the palace, each left to recover in body, mind, and spirit. Months turned into years, and no child came. Ferdinand's frustration curdled into fixation. He convinced himself that his wife's revulsion was the true barrier, that through sheer resistance, she was rejecting his seed. Reason gave way to desperation. He sought out frauds and mystics, anyone who claimed insight. Court documents reveal he ordered specially made restraints, leather straps padded with silk, to hold Maria Antonia in place during intercourse. He insisted it was not cruelty, only a matter of proper alignment. The measures escalated. Ferdinand became consumed by astrology, timing their encounters according to lunar cycles, solar disturbances, and imagined cosmic signs. Astrologers arrived from Italy, fortune-tellers from France, even a self-proclaimed sage from the East. This man told Ferdinand his deformity was not a curse, but a mark of divine potency, a dragon's blessing that required ritual to awaken. For 3 months, Ferdinand and Maria Antonia endured bizarre ceremonies filled with incense, chanting, and contorted positions supposedly copied from ancient texts. Too traumatized to resist, the queen complied. Then, astonishingly, she conceived. Twice the court celebrated, and Ferdinand basked in pride as Spain allowed itself hope. Both pregnancies ended in tragedy. The first miscarriage came in 1804, 4 months along. Publicly, doctors cited frailty. Privately, they admitted her body was too damaged, physically and emotionally, to sustain life. The second was worse. She carried nearly to term before losing the child in a horrific, bloody labor that almost killed her. She never truly recovered. Laudanum became a daily necessity. Her eyes hollowed, her movements slowed, as if she were already fading. By 1807, she was dead. Officially from fever, unofficially from despair. Ferdinand's response was chilling. He did not grieve. He accused her. He claimed she had sabotaged conception, taken herbs to prevent pregnancy, even conspired with liberals to deny him an heir. Her attendants were interrogated. The royal apothecary who treated her was found dead days later. Some said he left a letter explaining everything, but it disappeared, seized by Ferdinand's agents. And so Ferdinand sought another wife. This time it was Maria Isabel of Portugal, another cousin, another young innocent. She arrived in Madrid in 1816. Just 19, hopeful and bright. She was gently warned of unusual marital requirements. Her attendants knew about the cushions and oils, but nothing could prepare her. The wedding dazzled with splendor. The wedding night collapsed into chaos. Her screams were so loud guards heard them outside the chambers. By morning, blood-stained linens were removed in silence, broken furniture concealed. Maria Isabel had been thrust into the same nightmare that destroyed her predecessor. She never screamed again. Instead, she grew withdrawn, nervous, pale. Her voice began to shake. Palace staff called them episodes. Today they would be recognized as trauma. She flinched when Ferdinand entered, avoided his gaze, wasted away, stopped smiling. Ferdinand took her fear as insult, convinced she mocked him or plotted against him. As always, he tightened his grip. Her letters were intercepted, her food tasted, her rooms searched. Servants were rotated and questioned relentlessly. Nothing escaped suspicion. The obsession with producing an heir consumed him entirely. He hosted secret medical gatherings in the royal chambers, inviting German anatomists, French surgeons, even circus performers who claimed familiarity with abnormal bodies. They arrived, examined, debated, and speculated. The royal bedchamber was transformed into a kind of anatomical theatre, and Maria Isabel was reduced to a subject within her own marriage. One court doctor's diary describes a session in stark detail. Ferdinand stood naked upon a velvet dais, surrounded by men in powdered wigs who measured, sketched, and murmured suggestions for devices and procedures yet to be built. Behind a screen, Maria Isabel waited, drugged, colourless, scarcely present. Some of those pen and ink drawings escaped the palace and circulated quietly through underground medical circles, where scholars argued over causes, genital gigantism, localized hormonal excess, or some congenital anomaly without precedent. A French physician dismissed the debate with a single phrase, calling him the monstrous manhood of Spain. Meanwhile, in Madrid, Maria Isabel collapsed inward. She stopped eating, barely slept, and spoke of a presence in the room that never left her. Some whispered of hauntings, others of memories too heavy to escape. Well, in 1818, she died, officially from nervous exhaustion. Unofficially because she had simply surrendered. Rumors spread that it was self-inflicted. Others believed her body had reached its limit. However it ended, she joined Maria Antonia in that unspoken fraternity of royal women destroyed by Ferdinand's vexations. His response followed a familiar pattern. He suspected plots, ordered repeated autopsies, arrested attendants, and accused foreign powers of poisoning her to weaken the Bourbon line. What passed for grief was really delusion. He commissioned a death mask of her face and kept it nearby, whispering to it during sleepless nights, and yet, within weeks, plans for another marriage were underway. By then, his reputation had crossed borders. He was no longer merely the desired one, but the deformed. Negotiations with royal houses became fraught. Princesses refused outright. Families demanded separate chambers, binding contracts, personal guards. At last, necessity won. Saxony, impoverished and desperate, offered a daughter, Maria Josepha Amalia, old enough, devout enough, and with few alternatives. The third marriage was muted, stripped of celebration, steeped in quiet dread. Maria Josepha, 24, arrived fully informed. She brought her own physician, her own devices, her own drugs. She treated marriage not as destiny, but as experiment, recording each attempt with clinical precision, dates, methods, failures, without shock or illusion. That detachment unsettled Ferdinand. Her calm made him feel dissected. Paranoia returned. He imagined her notes being sent to Saxony, her doctor acting as an informant. Letters were seized, rooms searched, journals confiscated. Still, no heir came. Spain itself was unraveling. Colonies in revolt, famine at home, but Ferdinand's gaze never strayed far from his own body and the closed doors of his bedchamber. Then, in 1829, the impossible seemed to occur. Maria Josepha was with child. After decades of disaster, the court dared to hope. Ferdinand did not merely rejoice, he spiraled into mania. Guards were posted day and night. Food was blessed and tested twice. Physicians arrived from across Europe. Priests murmured prayers over the womb. Mystics were consulted in case heaven itself had intervened. No error would be tolerated. The pregnancy faltered at 7 months. Today, it would be named placental abruption. But within a palace ruled by fear and superstition, certainty meant nothing. Ferdinand distrusted conventional doctors and turned instead to astrologers, alchemists, and miracle mongers. On May 18th, Maria Josepha went into premature labor. It was catastrophic. Ferdinand insisted on standing beside the bed, shouting accusations, issuing orders, even as she screamed. A daughter was born alive, but lived only a few hours. Maria Josepha lingered for 3 weeks, then died of infection and blood loss. Physicians spoke of childbed fever. The court spoke of tragedy. Ferdinand spoke of murder. He refused burial, demanded revival, ordered heat, stimulants, prayers. Decay made the truth unavoidable. Only then did he allow funerals. Even so, he preserved them in death, commissioning masks of mother and child and placing them beside those of Maria Antonia and Maria Isabel. His chambers became a shrine to failure, a gallery of loss. Still, the machinery moved on. Ministers arranged a 4th marriage in silence. Spain needed continuity. Ferdinand needed an heir by any means. The chosen bride was Maria Cristina of Naples, a distant cousin and, crucially, already pregnant by another man. Everyone knew. The court murmured. Ambassadors reported it home, but Ferdinand did not object. If heaven would not grant him a child, he would claim one anyway. In 1830, Maria Cristina gave birth to a daughter, Isabella, and Spain seized upon her as hope incarnate. To Ferdinand, she was something else entirely, the proof of success he could never truly own, and the living reminder of everything his body had failed to do. From that point on, the final years of his life unraveled, mind, flesh, and court together, as his suspicion narrowed, and his fixation on Maria Cristina deepened into something darker still. He understood that the child was not his, yet the illusion had to be preserved. An illusion demanded domination. Absolute domination. He ordered peepholes cut into palace walls so he could observe the queen at all hours, not just during courtly appearances, but in moments meant to be private. Servants whispered of seeing the king with his eye pressed to a hidden opening, as Maria Cristina nursed Isabella, knelt in prayer, or sat silently alone. Every movement was analyzed for treachery. Eating ceased to be nourishment and became ceremony. Each dish was sampled by several servants, who then had to wait half an hour before the food was presented, in case poison worked slowly. When some tasters collapsed from exhaustion, Ferdinand took it as proof of danger, not cruelty. Trapped inside this machinery of suspicion, Maria Cristina began to break. She wrote frantic letters to Naples, intercepted before they ever left Madrid. In them she described her existence as captivity. "I live in a glass cage," she wrote, observed in every breath, every glance, every silence. It was never enough. Ferdinand stationed watchers even in the chapel, timed her prayers, catalogued the books she read, and demanded loyalty trials for any courtier who offered her a compliment. To him, "Even you look well today," hinted at conspiracy. Foreign envoys were appalled. Reports sent abroad warned that Spain's king was unstable, consumed by paranoia. Alliances froze. Royal houses refused to engage. The economy slid further into collapse as Ferdinand poured money into guards, secret passages, surveillance chambers, and grotesque medical curiosities. While the empire bled, he governed nothing beyond his own fears. His deepest descent came as Isabella grew. He became obsessed with her origins, staring at her for hours, comparing her features to painted likenesses of himself, Maria Cristina, and every Neapolitan male relative he could find. Artists were hired to create composite portraits of possible fathers, laid beside the child's face for study. Genealogists, anatomists, even physicists were summoned to prove she was his. Their conclusions were always evasive, padded with ambiguity. No one dared speak the truth. He clung to the lie, yet it tormented him. Some nights he wept while holding Isabella. Other nights he raged, whispering fractured prayers, begging forgiveness. She became both his redemption and his condemnation, proof that he was at once sovereign and impostor. As his health failed, the court followed. Servants were replaced constantly. Ministers were interrogated over imagined disloyalties. Conversation died. Even walls felt unsafe. The king's madness seeped into every corner. In 1832, he reached a new extremity, convinced that Maria Cristina could poison him through touch alone. Before any physical contact, doctors were forced to inspect her body under his gaze. What little intimacy remained was stripped into humiliation. The surveillance spread to Isabella herself. Her clothes were examined for hidden devices, her dolls torn apart for secret messages, her baths observed. He held her close, desperate for belonging, terrified of what she represented. By 1833, he was unraveling completely. He stopped eating, barely spoke, muttered accusations tangled with historical fantasies. His hands trembled, his skin ashen. The mind that once ruled through fear now drifted beyond reach. On September 29, 1833, Ferdinand VII died. Officially, gout. In truth, a lifetime of paranoia, sexual trauma, psychological torment, and bodily suffering that even kingship could not insulate against. In secrecy, his physicians performed one final duty. They preserved the infamous deformity, the grotesque anatomy that had shaped a reign and scarred a nation. It measured more than 14 inches, with wildly uneven girth and internal damage from failed interventions and crude attempts at correction. It was sealed away, hidden, locked within Vatican archives, deemed too disturbing for record. Ferdinand is remembered as one of Europe's most destructive monarchs, not for conquest or reform, but for something more tragic. He was a ruler who could not master his own body and allowed that failure to consume his kingdom. Spain bore the cost. His wives bore the cost. His subjects, his daughter, his legacy, all carried the weight of one man's deformity and the delusions it fed. And somewhere in darkness, preserved in wax and silence, rests the final monument to that obsession. A reminder not merely of power, but of what happens when pain, shame, and fixation are given a crown.